So I want to take us back a little bit here. I want to take us back to Lehman Brothers, which does not exist anymore. And so that's what really caught my attention because
Right.
obviously during the 2008, 2009 financial crisis, that was the first large bank to go down and you used to work for them. So what was, just give us more of a experience of what was that like? So you're working at Lehman Brothers, all of a sudden it's no more. What was that experience like?
Well, it was stressful, I
I
think
would
is the
imagine.
honest answer. Look, I was a young person with a young family, trying to find my way through it. But I think kind of intellectually, it was great lessons on the financial system. Something like this happens, and really the walls come down around you, metaphorically, and it forces you to really want to understand what happened. What does all this stuff? What were the causes of these things, and what does it mean longer run? I was fortunate to have some excellent mentors at the time, economists that had already great careers in other economies that had gone through these types of things. What we saw in the United States in 2009 was a major financial crisis and banking crisis. It had been a while in the United States, but we have seen these sort of things around the world and throughout history. And I was very fortunate to have some mentors to kind of coach me through this is how it played out in Japan, or this is how it played out in emerging markets, and help me understand those things. And look, I think what it taught me was a couple of things. One is on the financial system as a whole. I think it speaks to the risks that you take by relying on centralized intermediaries that incorporate a lot of leverage, and there may not be very transparent, and they may be taking big risks for the public. Lehman Brothers was a private business, but its failure had huge public ramifications, and so there were kind of financial stability issues and public policy questions tied to this. And I guess I could see a vision where more of the financial system runs on public networks, on open source software. To me, maybe that's a system that is more resilient. And then the other piece to it was the government's response to the whole set of
Yes.
events. That was in the immediate aftermath of Lehman Brothers, but also in the years following. For those of you that weren't as zoomed in on this stuff at the moment, there essentially were a series of bailouts, and then interest rates going down to zero, and quantitative easing. And anyway, this story played out for a number of years after 2008 and 9 as the kind of government's rescue of the financial system got bigger and bigger and bigger. And there became fears about deflation and the need to shore up the economy against deflation, all of those types of things. And it just spoke to the ability of the government to respond aggressively to economic weakness. And that same response was reinforced with COVID. We saw exactly the same playbook with COVID. In a sense, the government was fighting the last war with COVID, in the sense that this was the right, what we did after COVID, zero interest rates, quantitative easing, government spending. This was what was needed to get the economy out of the financial crisis in 2008-9. But now it has just become standard policy. And so my thinking would be, if we come to the next recession, there is no tolerance for a challenging economic time. We're just going to cut interest rates down to zero again, and we're going to do quantitative easing, and we're going to spend money and expand the fiscal deficits. And this will just compound the problem of debt imbalances and fiat currency debasement. So these are the kind of threads that these took a long time, I think, to form in my head, these ideas, to be perfectly honest. But these are the kind of two threads that came out of the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy and the 2008 financial crisis. And this is when, this was what Satoshi was looking at too. Satoshi wrote the white paper on Halloween 2008, released the blockchain in January 2009. And whoever Satoshi was looking at these same set of facts, the kind of fragilities in the traditional financial system and the willingness of governments to bail out financial institutions and the economy as a whole. And so Bitcoin, Bitcoin is a kind of obvious thing for maybe somebody like that. For me, I guess that, somebody that was thinking about macro at Lehman Brothers and in the years that followed, Bitcoin seems like a very natural consequence to those, to that period of history. And I think that kind of story is continuing to play out in the economy and our financial markets today.
Yeah, that's totally fair. So seeing the financial crisis and then experiencing that with Lehman Brothers, but then obviously looking into, okay, like what is happening right now? So take us through that bridge right there. So Lehman Brothers happens, financial crisis happens, and then is that around the same time you discovered Bitcoin, or was it a couple of years later?
Well, I would say discovered Bitcoin was relatively early, but decided that I wanted to spend all my time and capital on it was later.
Fair, fair.
If you're working in macroeconomics on Wall Street, Bitcoin was a subject matter that came up relatively quick. We are aware of all these types of things, anything happening in, payments innovation and all these sort of things. Our hedge fund clients, people that were very early, like Mike Novogratz at Galaxy, people like this were, talking to the Goldman Sachs economics department about Bitcoin. And so we were aware of these things. But like many people, I didn't take it that seriously at first. It was kind of a curiosity, and I think I didn't exactly get it at first. And it took a few tries, lots of books and lots of, looking at data, and also just thinking conceptually about some of the things that was going on. So, but like many other kind of people in macro, I was aware of the phenomenon early on. And of course, you look back now and you wish you had, spent more money on buying Bitcoin and all this type of thing. Don't you all feel that way? But that's okay. I mean, that's okay. That's often how these things go. I guess I'm an economist, not a tech guy, first and foremost. And so, it took a little while for it to kind of reach a level that really resonated with me and I think spoke to the depth. And I would say, as much as I love Bitcoin, I'm not sure that I would be willing to spend everything I got, all my energy on this subject if it were just digital store of value money. I think that is a hugely important use case. It's a $2 trillion use case today and is an extremely important asset. And Bitcoin, potentially could develop into more. But for me, it's the package of both Bitcoin, digital store of value money, and the macro thesis behind that, as well as the financial innovation of decentralized finance, stablecoins, smart contracts, and everything else. So it's all that together, I think, that keeps me so engaged in the space. And so I think that's also something that it took for me was crypto had to mature a little bit more before it seemed like big enough for me to want to be all in. And the emergence of kind of high quality DeFi tools was a big part of that, kind of clarifying, I think, for me and many other people of the incredible depth in this industry and asset class.
I understand. So looking at as more of a holistic approach rather than, okay, this is just Bitcoin, completely get that. So as far as that goes, what is that aha moment? Okay, so you've had Bitcoin, you've been hearing about it, then you have the rise of these other cryptocurrencies and maybe some stable coins. Do you remember a singular moment, or was it just eventually like, you know what, I'm going to dive deep into this, all cryptocurrencies, whatever it is I'm going in?
There were a series of moments, but I think the thing that I would emphasize to this audience and for people that haven't done it before is the first time that I used Aave and the first time that I used Uniswap, I was absolutely blown away. The idea that I could access financial instruments with a wallet without having anything other than a series of words on a piece of paper, that you could have full control of finance in a self-sovereign way, as people say it in crypto, but basically with no institution whatsoever, really your own control of your assets. And then you could take them through the process of exchanging them for something else or borrowing against them for cash, dollars, digital dollars, stable coins. I mean, to me, that was such an eye-opening, jaw-dropping, shocking experience. That kind of open, and that really just speaks to, and I think that its excitement about DeFi has not left me. I do think that every time I, use a DeFi tools in some way, I try to use these tools in my day-to-day life whenever possible, make payments, that type of thing with stable coins. I'm still very surprised, how well it works. People have kind of complaints about, user experience and different things with crypto. But I think you need to take a step back and say, do you realize that, if you go to any computer anywhere in the world that is connected to the internet and you have this little piece of paper with some, seed phrase written on it, some words or password written on it, you can access all of your financial assets and make any transaction that you want. That is amazing to me. That is the kind of expansive vision about what we're working on here. And just to bring it back to Bitcoin for a second, the point of Bitcoin is that you can have that same thing with scarce digital money.
Right.
that anywhere in the world, if you're able to access the Bitcoin ledger, which just means being able to access the internet, and you have your private key or your seed phrase or your password, however you want to call it, you can access your Bitcoin wealth. And that you don't need anything beyond that. I mean, to me, that is really amazing and a transformation that I'm still blown away by. And I'm just thrilled to be able to share that vision with investors every day.
This is amazing. So you're just looking at these tools, you're using these tools, you're experiencing that, which is huge, right? I mean, people need to utilize these tools to actually understand, okay, like, what does this mean? Like, what does Uniswap mean as a decentralized exchange? And doing this all within DeFi, decentralized finance. So this is huge. So as of right now, are there certain tools that you have been exploring the most recent, like past year or project that you're really excited about? Not necessarily maybe from an investment standpoint, just from like you personally utilizing it. Has there been anything like that in the past year?
Well, I'm going to give you the kind of boring answer, I guess, but
That's
that to
fine.
me is stablecoin. I
Yeah,
think
absolutely.
stablecoins are the honest but somewhat boring answer. I mean, I think that's the answer. I think that what we're going to see in the not very distant future, and you see it today, it's just a little bit early still, but it is beginning, is online payments with stablecoins. Think about when you buy something online, you're typically given a kind of range of options, and those options are, credit card or PayPal or potentially, one or two other things. And pay with USDC or pay with stablecoin is going to be another option on those lists. And there will be advantages to merchants from offering that option. Merchants have to pay a 2 to 3% cost from using a credit card. So when you go to a restaurant and you swipe your credit card, just to use big round numbers, when you swipe your credit card and it's $100, the restaurant actually gets $97. $1.50 goes back to you in terms of card rewards, and the other $1.50 goes to the network of banks and credit card companies that process the transaction. So stablecoins are a way to just disintermediate that with quite low cost payments, and certainly using Ethereum layer 1 in a highly secure method. So I think many merchants are going to be happy to accept stablecoins and just save them a little money on credit card processing fees. So that's what I'm trying to work mostly on, is on the payments side of things. I would add, if I could carry on for 1 second, I would add that
whatever you,
also Bitcoin payments are interesting to me. This is not interesting to everybody. Some people think, Bitcoin's too volatile for payments. I actually don't believe that. I think Bitcoin payments are a perfectly reasonable thing. And the Lightning Network actually works pretty good now, so that you can have smooth payments experiences with lots of different Bitcoin wallets, and I've had more success with that as well. So I want to see payments. I want to see stablecoin payments. I want to see Bitcoin payments, potentially Ethereum payments. All of these things I think are going to be they're an option today, but it's still a little bit limited. And as the regulatory framework becomes more crisp, we've made great strides already, but as that becomes more crisp and more financial institutions know how to deal with stablecoins, these options will become ubiquitous. And that's really exciting. I love the idea of just paying for everyday things in stablecoins or Bitcoin. And I think we're very much moving down that path. So for me, that's the thing I'm most excited about. Now I have a team here, the research team at Grayscale, and we are deep in the weeds in lots of different things. I'll give some shout outs to things like Hyperliquid or things like BitTensor and many Zcash, and the team is excited about lots of different types of projects in the space. SWI, I should mention, one of my colleagues is a big SWI enthusiast. So there's lots of great projects in the space. For me personally, I like the boring thing. I just want to see us be able to make payments on a blockchain. I think we're making good progress towards rolling that out to many more users.
and that's amazing. Oh, look, that's not boring. That's implementation, right? Implementation to people like us, that's exciting, because if you think about it, at least for myself, about when I got into Bitcoin, like initially just like researching and whatnot, it was about 8 years ago now, 2026. Yeah, about 8 years ago, I could never have imagined this. I mean, I knew it'd probably get to this point, probably, but seeing it actually happen, I mean, as far as, okay, with Cash App, Jack Dorsey's application, I can send Lightning invoices, but then to take it one step further, with Square now, a lot of merchants are accepting Bitcoin payments, or some merchants are. And so that was something that was recently rolled out. So I remember reading that and I was like, this is insane. Because I remember talking to my friends about 7, 8 years ago. They're like, yeah, like, what is the point of this? I was like, payments. That's it. But now I can say it's payments and it's happening.